Welcome to Marketing and Mindset for Wellness Coaches, the podcast for health coaches and wellness entrepreneurs just like you who are building a business, making the world a healthier place, and designing a first-class life. I'm your host, Kim Foster, MD and certified business coach, and I'm on a mission to help you up-level your strategy and raise your mindset so you can truly thrive and grow your business. Let's get started. Hello, my friend. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I certainly am. I've been really enjoying my candles this month. I know this may sound kind of silly, like a small thing, but I have really been enjoying this little ritual. Before I had kids, I absolutely loved candles. I always had candles burning, especially in the winter, not just for the scent, but also for the light, which is the best. I love the coziness of candlelight. But once I had kids, I stopped using candles for the most part because I was always worried that they would get knocked over and start a fire. And, you know, that's something that I would prefer to avoid. So I really got out of the habit unless I was in the bath, like locked in there and could be sure that nobody was going to knock them over. But other than that, I kind of avoided using candles. And then the years went on and I just never really got back in the habit. And it's a very interesting thing, the way habits work, isn't it? The thing is, my firstborn is about to turn 15. So I'm thinking it's time. So I've started collecting candles and candle holders again and buying really gorgeous premium quality candles and actually lighting them regularly. And I just love it. I don't wait for special occasions or when I'm having a bubble bath. I just light them and release the worry of starting fires and just enjoy the atmosphere. Anyway, enough about candles. Let's dive into today's topic, which is all about overwhelm. In fact, I've got 6 steps to help you stop feeling overwhelmed even when life seems totally out of control. Now, I hear from people in my community all the time about the feeling of being overwhelmed, and I totally get it. There are a million things always going on at all times, and there always seems to be so many things to do. We have a culture of busy, of being crazy busy. And when I talk to people about how to not be overwhelmed, I'm usually met with a very resistant attitude, that's something along the lines of, well, there's nothing I can do about it. There are just a lot of things going on right now. But what I'm talking about is not really about changing your outside circumstances as much as I'm talking about managing your mind to beat overwhelm. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today, because as entrepreneurs, as coaches, we really can't afford to spin out into overwhelm. There are just too many things to do to stay on top of. And overwhelm, besides being very uncomfortable, is also very unproductive. So if you're building a business, and I kind of suspect that you are, then it's an investment in your own business to keep your mindset in a healthy, calm place and keep yourself out of overwhelm. So let's talk about how to do just that. Now, personally, I have been in extremely busy seasons of life with a lot of things going on, a lot of moving parts, and at these times, it would have been very easy to go into overwhelm. But I work very hard to manage my mind so I don't feel overwhelmed. Now, I'm definitely not perfect in this regard, but I have been getting better and better at this over the years. So I use these 6 steps that I'm going to walk you through today to keep myself out of overwhelm. Now, the key of it all is to focus on facts and stories, or as some people like to call it, math and drama. So this is something I've learned from a couple of different key mentors of mine in the personal development world, and it's one of the greatest lessons if you can learn to apply it to your life. Here's how it works. There are things that happen, the facts, and then there are the thoughts you choose to have about them, which are the stories. And the truth is, overwhelm does not have to be a part of your life. When you take a really hard look at it, overwhelm is just a story. It's not a fact. But before I get into the nuts and bolts of these 6 steps, let's just make sure we're on the same page about what I'm talking about. What is overwhelm? So when I say overwhelm, I'm talking about spinning into feelings of, I'm so busy, it's just too much, I'm so overwhelmed. I can't handle that. I'm so tired. There's so much going on. And all these kinds of statements are definitely colored with a bit of self-pity and a sort of wallowing in woe is me. Now, I have definitely been known to wallow in self-pity, much more so in the past, like I say, but it still creeps in now and then. So I know what this is all about. And I have worked hard to pull myself out of that vortex of self-pity when I feel it happening. It's really interesting. The chances are much higher that I'll go into this kind of lamenting state of mind when it's late in the day, like really close to bedtime. I call it sundowning, and my husband will definitely attest to this too, that this is just not a good time for me in general. And really the best thing to do at this point for me is just to get to bed, get some rest, and then look at things with fresh eyes in the morning. But the truth is, overwhelm is an indulgent emotion. Feeling overwhelmed is not caused by your circumstances. It's caused by the thoughts that you're having and what's going on in your mind. So that's the key, managing your mind to beat that feeling of overwhelm no matter what's going on in your life. Okay, so here's my 6-step process to stop those feelings of overwhelm. Now, some of these steps are designed to prevent you from getting anywhere near overwhelm, and some of them are what to do when you start to feel overwhelm actually creeping in. So step 1 is to make the decision that you are no longer available to indulge in overwhelm. This is step 1. Now, I know this sounds so simple, it's ridiculous and can't possibly work, but just stay with me. So deciding that you are no longer available to indulge in overwhelm is something that I learned from one of my mentors. You see, there are emotions that serve you and emotions that don't serve you. This is something I teach my clients when we're working on a particularly thorny mindset issue. And since it's your thoughts that create your emotions and you are actually in charge of your thoughts, you can choose thoughts that only produce emotions that serve you or, useful emotions. And of course, the truth is overwhelm is an emotion. It's a negative emotion that does not serve you. Now, not all negative emotions are non-useful. Sadness, for example, that's a negative emotion, but it does have a purpose. In the right setting, it can definitely be useful. The loss of a pet, for example, of course, sadness is an expected emotion and it's part of the grieving process. So we don't need to strive to eliminate all negative emotions, but overwhelm is an emotion that does not serve us in any way. In fact, staying in overwhelm keeps you stuck. Here's a story to just help you understand what I mean here. Now, recently I was skiing with my family and I took my 9-year-old down a run that it turns out was a little bit beyond his skill level. Bad mom, I know. And he had a pretty nasty spill. And when I got down to him a few seconds later, I could see he was hurt, much more so than any of the other wipeouts that he'd had. I mean, he's learning, right? So of course he's had plenty of falls, but I could see and hear from how he was reacting that he was really hurt in his shoulder. And at this point, stuck in the snow near the very top of a run, and here in British Columbia, the mountains are big. So the bottom of the mountain was, of course, nowhere in sight, and I knew it was a long way away, and there just weren't really very many people around, and I could have started to panic, to get totally overwhelmed, for one thing riddled with the guilt that I had done this. And I did, of course, start to feel that irrational kind of tiger mom feeling of just wanting to superhuman lift him up and carry him on my back for the next 20 or 30 minutes that it would taken me to ski all the way down the mountain. And we could get to safety that way. Anyway, I somehow managed to stop the overwhelm and the panic and come up with a more rational solution. I knew we needed ski patrol, but I'd never contacted them and wasn't sure that they would just randomly pass this way. I distantly remembered the emergency number for the ski patrol was on the back of my lift pass. So I dialed that number on my cell phone and calmly explained where we were, and then they came to help. So that's what I mean by overwhelm not being an emotion that serves me. In no scenario would I need to feel overwhelmed to solve this problem. It's not helpful, and in fact was blocking my ability to think straight. So that's what you need to do when something unexpected happens, to recognize the feeling of overwhelm as it begins to creep in and to decide that you are not available for that emotion. By the way, my son is totally fine now. Ski patrol was awesome. They brought him safely down the mountain on one of those rescue toboggan things. And he did fracture his arm, but he's thrilled to bits with this cool sling that he's got for his shoulder and is loving telling the story of the rescue toboggan to all his friends at school. All right. Okay. Let's move on to step number 2, which is simplify by using the structure of constraints. We live in a time when we have so many decisions to make every day, and that can very easily lead to the feeling of overwhelm. It isn't a bad thing. We just need to train our brains to deal with it. And what that comes down to is discipline and constraint. Now, I'm sure you've heard about decision fatigue, that our brains just go on shutdown when we reach a certain number of decisions in a day. And this would definitely lead to a feeling of overwhelm. So we need to prevent that from happening by limiting the number of decisions we have to make. Now, a simple example of one way that I do this is with grocery shopping. Listen, I love grocery stores when I'm in a relaxed mood and I have plenty of time. But let's face it, there are just way too many choices in our grocery stores these days. So I keep things simple and kind of regimented for myself by doing my grocery shopping online. And I have my saved weekly grocery list, and I basically just order the same groceries each week. This way, I streamline the process, I keep my decision making to a minimum, and I just take care of basics by planning ahead of time. Anywhere that you can put rules in your life that will help you limit your options, you're actually doing yourself a favor by avoiding the overwhelm. Okay, so this leads directly into step number 3, which is make decisions and move forward. Analysis paralysis is another form of overwhelm. Going into shutdown because you think you need to gather more facts and to, think about things some more. But clarity does not come from more sitting around and thinking about stuff. It really comes from doing things, from making decisions and getting on with it. Then things become more clear. Now, I'm all about working things out in my mind to a point. I love journaling. I'm a big-time journaler, daily in fact, but there comes a point when there's only so much I can think about and work out in my head and in my journal. I always follow up my thoughts and pondering and self-exploration with a whole lot of action. But there's an important thing about decisions, and that's deciding how you're going to feel about your decision. Now, this one is huge. I tell my clients this all the time. The most important decision that you make is not the first decision. It's actually the second one. And the second decision is deciding how you're going to feel about your first decision. So many times we make a decision and then we doubt ourselves. We live in this state of regret. I've decided this, but maybe I shouldn't have done it this way. And then you've got a split energy about it. You've made a decision, but you can't even go all in because part of you is holding back and saying, oh, maybe I shouldn't have chosen this one. I've definitely done this one myself for sure, and always it does not end well. My husband, for example, has a terrible time deciding from the menu at restaurants, and I used to be the same. I would order something, and then I would regret my choice, which meant I wouldn't even really enjoy my food. I finally got fed up with all of that, and I was like, you know what? When I decide something from now on, I'm just going to decide to feel good about it. I'm going to go all in on my decision and get all of my energy behind me and pushing me toward whatever it is that I chose. And what I can tell you is that it is so much more fun to live this way. You just decide, and then you decide that you're going to feel amazing about it. It really can be that simple. You just stop fighting with your decisions, and to me, that's a very powerful and a graceful way to live. It's not effective to make a decision and then spend the next weeks or years doubting that decision. It's important to move on. Just decide that that was a good decision for you in that particular moment and keep making decisions and keep deciding how you're going to feel about them. So to help keep you out of overwhelm, make a decision, take action, and decide to feel good about the decision that you made. If you stay spinning in indecision, overwhelm really won't be very far off. Okay, so let's move on to the 4th step, which is a bit of a change of direction, but it's to schedule your priorities first. It's very important to be super clear on what your priorities are and to put those priorities on the calendar before you make time for other people's priorities. By this, I mean things that you've been invited to and asked to do, really anything that represents somebody else's agenda. Now, I know that this can be a tough thing, especially for people in the helping professions, for people in wellness, like you are most likely. If you're a heart-centered person and you want to help other people, I get that totally. I have been that person too, but you really need to discern the difference between helping others and being a people pleaser. There is a difference. And making the conscious choice of scheduling your own priorities before other people's, it means you're being proactive, not reactive. It means you're maintaining elegant control of your schedule, not just running around doing things for other people and putting yourself last. It will require that you'll have to say no to other people. And I'm not saying that it's easy, but it is the right thing to do. Personally, I am extremely protective of my calendar. I have a very good friend who is terrible at this. If somebody asks her to do something, she immediately says yes. Now, she's a single mom. She has 2 young kids and has a very complicated schedule. But whenever somebody asks her to do something, she is the first to volunteer. Need more drivers for a school field trip? She says yes. Need stuff for the bake sale? She is the first one to sign up. It is no surprise to me that she is always tired, always stressed, never has time to properly take care of herself. So please don't be that way. If you want to avoid becoming overwhelmed, keep a firm grasp on your priorities and your schedule. Quite frankly, if your schedule is unmanageable, it really means that you need to cut some things out. Okay, and while we're talking about your schedule, that brings us to step number 5, which is chunk everything down into action items and put them on your calendar. Now, this is all about breaking big projects into bite-sized tasks. That's because a sure recipe for overwhelm is not getting things done when you really need to get things done. This is a skill that I've honed over time. Again, chunking tasks down. I used to have just huge projects on my to-do list, and then they wouldn't get done. And the reason is because I just didn't know where to start. I think I really nailed this skill, though, when I was writing novels, because obviously writing a novel is a huge monster of a task. And if you just stand there at the bottom of the mountain staring up at it, wondering how you're going to get to the top, you are never going to take that first step. What helped me in this approach was a book called Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. It's a Bible in writing circles, and for good reason. But one of the basic premises is the story that gives the book its title. Lamott tells the story of her brother when they were kids being completely overwhelmed by a homework project that he had to complete about birds. It just felt huge and he was having a meltdown. And so their dad sat down with him and said, "Okay, buddy, let's just take this bird by bird." So I use this story in my own household when my kids are getting overwhelmed by a big homework project or some other monster task they have to do, like cleaning their rooms. And now the phrase bird by bird is just a shorthand in our family for chunking things down and doing it one small step at a time. So this is what you need to do too. Chunk each thing down into ridiculously small bite-sized pieces and then distribute those pieces across your calendar. I've even found that for myself, something that seems like it's a single job, like write sales page for a new program that I'm launching, for example, it seems like just a single thing, right? But what I do is I break it down into pieces that look something like write the first draft of the copy of the sales page, revise draft, polish draft, source images for the page, choose the font for the page, and so on. Color scheme and formatting and revising the formatting and checking the countdown timers, all of those things. All of those little pieces become their own task, their own bite-sized task. Even those design elements that I listed, I could have written a task that was something like choose design elements for page, but even that is too big in my mind. What's better is to write choose fonts, choose color, choose images, and so on. A sure sign that you haven't chunked things down enough is when you don't get started on something. If you haven't created the very smallest atomic level first step for yourself, it's likely that that action item is just going to languish on your to-do list, which of course is going to lead straight to that feeling of being overwhelmed. Okay, so we're on to the very final step, step number 6, which actually circles back to something I was talking about at the very beginning, and it's to separate facts from stories. This final step really comes into play when you're about to spin into overwhelm. Everything else I've mentioned up to now is to help you stay organized so you don't get anywhere near overwhelm, but more than likely you'll end up heading toward overwhelm at some point. And so this is how to stop from completely spinning out. You have to be able to give yourself that separation, to really be able to step outside yourself and see your thoughts for what they are. Just stories you're telling yourself. Now, I'm not saying that this is easy, but it is a skill that you can learn and hone with practice. It's a matter of asking yourself, is this true? And what are the facts here? And also, what am I thinking about this situation? For example, a while ago, I guess I was kind of near the beginning of my journey as a coach, so I wasn't super experienced yet, and I only had a couple of clients, but I had a private coaching session booked with one of my clients, and I had to juggle a couple of things to make this particular session happen because we were out of town, I was with my family, and we were staying at a hotel, but I had made some arrangements to use the business lounge, and then I woke up feeling dreadful with the beginnings of the flu. However, I was determined to push through, mostly because I had worked hard to make the arrangements to make this work, and I very, very rarely cancel client appointments, if ever. And then, for whatever reason, the Wi-Fi in the business lounge was kind of iffy as I was testing it, and I could feel myself starting to spin into overwhelm and frustration. And I stopped myself. I heard my thoughts, and they were definitely of the self-pity variety, like, why is everything so hard? And this kind of thing always happens to me. So I separated myself from the drama and asked myself, is that true? Are things always hard for me? And of course I realized the answer was no, of course not. Many times things work out just fine, and sometimes things go wrong, and that is just life. And I had a very simple choice. I could push on and continue to find solutions to this, or I could choose a different way and just contact my client, reschedule the appointment, and voila, that's what I did, and it worked out completely fine. Now, I could have easily pushed on and made it work, and that actually might have been fine too. But the key thing here is that I didn't let myself get too far into that vortex of overwhelm, because that would have just been indulging in that drama and not actually making a choice. So I cleared my head, dropped the drama, and instead just made a choice and kept moving forward. It's important to always recognize that you can choose your thoughts. If you're choosing thoughts that aren't supportive, you're going to feel overwhelmed. You have to manage your words. Saying things like, I'm overwhelmed, or I'm crazy busy, it just creates that drama. The more you practice eliminating overwhelm from your life, the easier it is. And remember, your thoughts create your feelings. If you're feeling overwhelmed, it's because you're choosing thoughts that are causing that overwhelm. And always know that there is another way. Okay, there you have it. That's everything I wanted to say for today. I hope you enjoyed this topic, and I would love for you to just start by observing your thoughts and the words you're saying. Are you running around saying things like, I'm so busy and I'm completely overwhelmed? And just start noticing that. That's the best place to start. Before I sign off, I just want to give a shout out to my podcast coach who helped me get this show off the ground. Mary Chan, who is super talented and really helped me chunk down this massive podcast project into manageable bite-sized pieces. I really could not have tackled it without her help. So if you're thinking about starting your own podcast, I definitely recommend checking out Mary. I'll link her website in the show notes. Okay, well, that's all for today. Have an amazing day, and I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode and you're keen to keep building your wellness coaching business, let's start by getting you some more clients. You can download my free guide called 3 Ways to Win New Clients This Week. In this 11-page workbook, I walk you through the simple steps to get you new coaching clients. Just 3 easy things that you can do right away. Visit drkimfoster.com/get new clients to download that workbook for free. That's all for today. I will talk to you in the next episode.